Tired of spending hundreds of dollars for prescription glasses? Zenni offers thousands of affordable eyewear styles, starting at just $6.95. No ridiculous markups, no hassles, just quality, affordable eyewear delivered right to you. Visit Zenni today at zenni.com/CNN. AC360 did not air on CNN today. For this podcast episode, we are bringing you an hour of CNN coverage from earlier in the day.
And top of the hour now, I'm Pamela Brown. Happy New Year to you. Well, a Michigan family begins this new year in both shock and relief. Their missing son, a 48-year-old security executive, is found alive, but in Russia, detained under charges that he was caught in the act of spying for the United States. However, the family of Paul Whelan says, quote, "The innocence is undoubted." In his first on-camera interview, Whelan's twin brother told CNN the Russian allegations are not true.
Paul's a very capable person. He's physically a large person. So I mean, he has a background in law enforcement. He was a Marine. He does corporate security, and he travels regularly. So he's not the sort of person who would stumble into a strange environment or make poor choices that could cause him risks. But particularly, he wouldn't have made choices that would have gotten sideways of the Russian government and its Espionage Act.
Well, the brother also revealed that Whelan is a retired Marine, and he's traveled to Russia multiple times, including when he was a staff sergeant back in 2006, as pictured right here. Now, Whelan lived in Michigan and is now a global security director for a private firm, which he joined in 2017. The family did not know about the spy accusations until just yesterday morning, when Russia's counterintelligence agency announced that Whelan was in custody. Let me turn to CNN's Martin Savage, who is in the Michigan town where Whelan lives. So, Martin, has any of the family been able to speak with him since he was detained?
Hello, Pamela. No, they have not, and they are very worried about his condition and about when he may return. In fact, what they really want is for U.S. State Department officials to meet with their son, with their brother, who is being held by Russian authorities, and to try to ascertain exactly how is he doing, and then also to try to understand more fully what is it he's been charged with and why. Because even though, yes, he does have a background in corporate security, he was not working in Russia in any capacity for his company or for anyone else for that matter. He was there to attend a wedding. In fact, it's his twin brother that says that's the kind of guy he is. He went to Russia to help a friend with his wedding and, of course, to attend that wedding. And he never showed up, and that's when the family got very worried. Listen to the twin here.
Well, Paul's a kind soul. He's very generous. He's notorious among my kids for his huge belly laugh. And he often has stories that make you eye roll. So he's that sort of a personality. He's very loyal to family and friends. And I think that's partly how this worked out. He had a request from a friend, and he thought he could help out because he had been to Russia and could maybe help other Americans from the family who hadn't been to Russia to navigate their way around, get on the metro, that sort of thing. But he's a very kind person.
So when he disappeared on the 28th, when he was not at the wedding, when he was not heard from by family and friends, they thought actually something really tragic might have happened, that he may have been a victim of crime, that he may have been murdered. And that's why you have this sort of odd relief when they found out that, no, actually he's been arrested. But then the very serious concern about, but arrested on espionage, that just doesn't meet the character that they know of their loved one, which is why they're so very concerned about what comes next.
Understandably. All right, Martin Savage, live for us in Michigan. And at the same time, this American is detained in Russia. There is a Russian in the U.S. who pleaded guilty just this month. Maria Butina says she conspired with a Russian government official and at least one other person while a student in the States. Well, she has a hearing in February to determine a sentencing date. So joining me now to discuss all of this, CNN senior international correspondent Matthew Chance and Jill Doherty, global fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. And she also used to work for CNN's Moscow bureau chief. Thank you both for coming on. Matthew, I want to go to you first. Has Russia given any response to the spy arrest, acting as a response to Butina's case? Is there any connection here, we believe?
Well, I mean, look, the only connection may be timing. It was just 2 weeks ago that Maria Butina pleaded guilty to conspiracy after US prosecutors accused her of attempting to infiltrate conservative groups in the United States to influence Americans who are members of those groups, like the Republican Party and the National Rifle Association. But beyond that, there's certainly no line been drawn between this latest arrest of Paul Whelan in Moscow on the 28th of December and the situation that Maria Butina is confronting. One caveat to that is that, first of all, the Russians are absolutely furious that Maria Butina has been accused in the way that she has been. They say that their intelligence services have no knowledge of her and they want her returned to Russia. The issue came up a couple of weeks ago in Vladimir Putin, the Russian president's annual news conference, in which he spoke about it. But he said, look, we're not going to be any retribution for this. We will not arrest innocent people, he said, simply to exchange them for someone else. Yet, a couple of weeks later, Paul Whelan is detained, accused of espionage. And the speculation is that actually that may be something that happens in the future, although it's too early to talk about a prisoner swap at this stage. But certainly that's what people are talking about as being a motivation behind this, Pamela.
Jill, what do you think? Do you think this is tit for tat?
I think it's not clear at this point, but I think it's obvious, as Matthew said, the timing and the circumstances. This is a very fraught time between Russia and the United States. It is correct that Moscow was furious, in fact, about Maria Butina, because, in fact, they had a massive PR campaign in social media saying, free Maria Butina. And at the same time, when Butina pleaded guilty for being an unregistered foreign agent, I'm sure that must have been quite embarrassing and damaging, in a sense, to the Kremlin. So you would think that they would want to do something to kind of answer in a PR way what happened to Maria Butina, and maybe more than just PR. So I think we have to be very careful here. But I do think you'd have to say circumstantially, those two things coming at the same time would lead you to think that although officially they are not saying, in fact, some people in Russia are denying there's any connection, it certainly appears that the timing would indicate that there could be.
And it's no surprise that people in Russia are denying that connection, given how we know Russia operates. But Jill, any thoughts on what Russia means when they say Whelan was detained, I should say, while carrying out an act of espionage?
Right. I've been reading the Russian media reports and the statements, and they're being very careful to present this as an extremely legal action. They say he was caught red-handed, essentially, in some type of espionage activity. They said, we are following the letter of the law. They even put in the official statement the charge and the number of the charge in the Russian legal code, et cetera. So what they are trying to say is we are following exactly what we should be. We have a very good case. And there's a subtext here of a lot of praise for how the FSB, the Russian Intelligence Service Domestic, kind of like the FBI here, it's the FSB, KGB former, how they carried out this operation. Lots of praise for how they did it. So they're going to take a very legalistic approach. And remember, one of the primary words that Russia uses in international relations, especially things like this, is reciprocity. They will answer precisely what is happening from the other side. So I think maybe we have to look for some reciprocity.
All right. So, Matthew, last question to you. Whelan's family says, quote, we trust that his rights will be respected. Any idea of how he is being treated while in custody there in Russia?
Well, the family pointed out that they've been informed that the Russians have 72 hours, basically, before they have to give consular access to US diplomats to ascertain the condition of the prisoner, Paul Whelan, in this case. That 72 hours will have passed already. He was arrested sometime in the afternoon, we believe, on December the 28th. And of course, it's now January the 1st, and so that 72 hours has passed. I've been in close contact with the US Embassy here to try and get some read on whether consular access has been granted. They've certainly requested it. They've called on Russia and reminded Russia that they have to give that kind of access. But at the moment, we've not received any indication that that access has actually been gotten and that Paul Whelan has managed to meet with any representative of the embassy.
All right. It will be interesting to see how this might impact U.S.-Russia relations moving forward. Matthew, Jill, thank you so much. And still ahead, President Trump feeling positive about the new year despite a government shutdown that's going on 11 days now and counting.
It's going to be a great year. Complicated, but great. People make it overly complicated, actually.
We will take you live to Washington, where he has just invited congressional leaders to the White House. Plus, the president puts a timetable on pulling troops out of Syria. We'll discuss the logistics of leaving in the next 4 months and what the military will leave behind. And later, a manhunt underway in Texas for the gunman who opened fire on a car in a Walmart parking lot, killing a 7-year-old girl and injuring her mom and younger sister. Hear what police are saying about a motive.
Tired of spending hundreds of dollars for prescription glasses? Our friends at Zenni Optical offer a huge variety of high-quality, stylish frames and state-of-the-art optics starting at just $6.95. You can get multiple frames with this great pricing for less than one pair elsewhere. Start building your eyewear wardrobe from the comfort of your own home at Zenni.com. With the latest trends in eyewear available in hundreds of frame styles and materials, there isn't a better way to change it up for every season. Plus, Zenni offers prescription sunglasses at incredible prices. Visit Zenni today at Zenni.com/CNN. That's ZENNI.com/CNN.
Nearly 11 full days, 800,000 federal employees are working without pay or furloughed and no end in sight. That's been the story of the government shutdown so far. But could tomorrow mark a turning point? CNN has learned that President Trump has invited congressional leaders from both parties to the White House for a meeting on Wednesday. And just moments ago, he tweeted, quote, "Border security and the wall thing and shutdown is not where Nancy Pelosi wanted to start her tenure as Speaker. Let's make a deal." But the president will likely take a pass on the deal the Democrats are currently offering. The proposal, which is set for a vote on Thursday, temporarily funds the Department of Homeland Security at current levels until February 8th. But it does not include any additional money for a border wall. And as the president said last night and many times before, the wall is not negotiable.
I'm in Washington. I'm ready, willing, and able. I'm in the White House. I'm ready to go. They can come over right now. They could have come over any time. I spent Christmas in the White House. I spent New Year's Eve now in the White House. And, I'm here. I'm ready to go. It's very important. A lot of people are looking to get their paycheck. And so I'm ready to go anytime they want. No, we are not giving up. We have to have border security. And the wall is a big part of border security, the biggest part.
I'm going to bring in two CNN political commentators joining me now to discuss all of this. Doug Heye is a former RNC communications director, and Dave Jacobson is a Democratic strategist. Gentlemen, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Doug, I'm going to start with you. President Trump has been determined, as we see, to make good on his campaign promise of building a wall. The Democrats are just as determined to prevent it from happening. What will be the result of tomorrow's meeting, and what is the end game here?
Well, it doesn't appear that either side really has an end game in sight or knows exactly what its strategy is. And the reason why is if you go back to 2013 when we had the government shutdown, I worked in the House of Representatives at that time, and we were doing on the Republican side events every day. The press might have cynically have called them political stunts. They would have been right. They were political stunts. But every day we were trying to fill the void in the media. We were trying to get our message advanced, and the Democrats and the White House were doing the same thing. The silence that we've had from both sides has really been deafening on this, and it's why we've seen this last so long. What has been interesting is Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats seem to be taking almost a Michael Corleone type offer here, where they're saying, Donald Trump, here's our offer, nothing. So the question is what actually gets done at the end, and we just don't know yet.
And let's talk about that offer. Dave, Democrats plan to vote on this plan that will go nowhere, let's be honest, in the Senate. They say Senate Republicans will then be complicit in the shutdown if it doesn't pass. But is this a risk politically, given that they will soon control one half of Congress?
Pamela, I don't think so. I mean, the American people are clearly on the side of the Democrats. Reuters just put out a poll days ago that shows 47% of Americans blame Donald Trump for this. That's 13 points more than they blame Democrats at 33%. And that's not just one poll. This is consistent. Quinnipiac a month ago had a poll that blamed Donald Trump on this. And the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump said that he would be, quote, proud to shut down the government over the border wall. And let's not also forget, Donald Trump said that Mexico was going to pay for the border wall, not American taxpayers. So the reality is, as Mick Mulvaney said back in 2016, that this border wall is absurd. Democrats are willing to come to the table for border security, but they're going to dig their heels in. They're clearly not going to fund that wall.
And Doug, the nation's largest federal employee union is now suing the government for requiring essential employees to work without pay during the shutdown. What do you think? Do you think it will take actions like this from everyday Americans who are outside of Congress to push lawmakers back to the bargaining table?
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, during the 2013 shutdown, I was considered essential and had to work even on weekends during the shutdown. There wasn't a lot of sympathy for government employees, but ultimately, I think we still have the question of what is that tipping point going to be? And it's certainly the only thing we know at this point is it's going to be political pressure, and which side feels the most political pressure. If you're Nancy Pelosi, you have had a great benefit in Donald Trump taking the blame of the shutdown on him and saying he'd be proud to call it the Trump shutdown. Mm-hmm. That has set the things against Republicans to the point that Mitch McConnell doesn't want to be seen publicly a whole lot because he doesn't want to answer a lot of questions, because we know that Donald Trump basically sold Senate Republicans out. They voted on a deal they thought the White House would accept, and that hasn't been acceptable to the White House at this point. So ultimately the question is, where does the political pressure fall and how long does it last?
Well, let's talk about that political pressure, Dave. You mentioned some polls, but as Doug just said, there's not a lot of sympathy for federal employees. For the everyday American who is not one of these 800,000 federal employees not getting paid, how much do they care about this government shutdown?
I think a tremendous amount. I mean, these are working people. These are middle-class folks. They're not millionaires and billionaires like Donald Trump and his Trump cronies. These are hardworking folks who depend on those paychecks to pay rent, to put food on the table for their families. And so this is a big issue. And look, I think the Democrats are going to put forward a common-sense plan for border security to fund the government, and they're going to continue to put forward such plans. And that's why the American people are on their side. Let's not forget, Pamela, the 2018 election was a watershed moment for Democrats who won 40 seats at a time when Donald Trump was crisscrossing the country campaigning against the caravan. It backfired. Now Donald Trump's a candidate for the 2020 election and campaigning on this hard-edge issue of immigration and this wall that he said Mexico was going to pay for. Perhaps could be a good issue for his base, but not for a 2020 electoral landslide, with those independent swing voters that he's going to need going into 2020. So I think this is a lose-lose issue for him.
Well, and of course, the president would tell you, look, I lost the House, but I did well in the Senate. Okay, listen, I want to ask you guys before we wrap up about what the president is now saying in a public battle with retired four-star Army General Stanley McChrystal, who said this on Sunday. Let's take a listen.
If you were asked to join the Trump administration, what would you say?
I'd say no. I think it's important for me to work for people who I think are basically honest, who tell the truth as best they know it.
You think he's a liar?
I don't think he tells the truth.
Is Trump immoral in your view?
I think he is.
So now the president, no surprise, firing back on Twitter, claiming McChrystal got fired like a dog by Obama. Last assignment, a total bust, known for big dumb mouth, Hillary lover. We should be clear, McChrystal was not fired. He did resign, though, after disparaging comments that he made about then Vice President Biden that appeared in a Rolling Stone article, as you probably recall. But, Doug, this is a president who touts his love and respect for the military, and yet he makes comments like these.
Yeah, look, clearly Donald Trump's biggest is a fan of people who are Donald Trump fans. That's no surprise. I would say Trump supporters often talk about how Donald Trump is a counterpuncher. The reality is he never misses an opportunity to punch below his weight. You're the leader of the free world. You don't need to attack former generals. It's just not a smart policy.
Dave, quick reaction.
It's just deplorable and reckless and unbecoming of a president of the United States. These are decorated war heroes who risk their lives for our country. And Donald Trump, perhaps, by the way, shouldn't be talking about decorated military veterans when he deferred from the draft. I mean, this is a president who refused to serve in the military, to risk his life to protect Americans. And now he's attacking decorated war heroes like the general.
Okay, thank you both, Doug, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
Well, up next, my interview with the mother of a 7-year-old little girl killed in a drive-by shooting. She and her family are pleading for the gunman to turn himself in and for the public to help find him.
I just want anybody, whoever out there that knows anything about the murder of my daughter, to just please step up.
Remember, to create an ad like this one, visit purewinning.com/CNN.
We are hearing from the mother who was shot in a drive-by that killed her 7-year-old daughter. Little Jasmine Barnes was riding in a car with her family near Houston on Sunday when a gunman opened fire from his truck beside them. I talked to LaPortia Washington from her hospital bed about what she would say to the shooter. What is your message to the man?
I just want him to be a man and turn himself in, because my child I would never get to see my child again. And you took her away from me behind whatever that was going on in your head. And I don't know if it was some kind of hatred, violent hatred, if it was a hate crime or what it was. Mm-hmm. But you could plainly see through my windows. I have no tint on my windows or anything. So you see that it was a mother, a black mother, with 4 beautiful children, girls in this car. You see straight through this car. So with no reason, even if something did happen when you fired that first shot and you seen my kids in that car, you should have stopped. You should have stopped. You took my baby from me, and you have no care in the world. And I just wish you would turn yourself in.
Absolutely gut-wrenching. Well, that manhunt does continue for the gunman. I want to bring in CNN's Nick Valencia on that. What more do we know about this shooter, Nick?
That is just such a difficult interview to listen to, Pamela. Can you imagine being that family and seeing your daughter, your sister gunned down in front of you, and you survive it in what is said to be an unprovoked attack by the Harris County Sheriff's Office? And this is the details that they're giving out so far, that the suspected shooter is a white male in his 40s, that he had a beard, and he was in a red pickup truck. There are very other few details beyond that, though. Not even the make and model of the pickup truck is being released, no license plate number, anything like that. But the sheriff in Harris County is saying that the family did nothing wrong, nothing to provoke this incident. This is possibly, it could be a potential hate crime. Nothing is being left off the table right now. And there are very limited details. We know that Jasmine Barnes, she's 7 years old. She was in a car with her mother, her 3 siblings. They were in a Houston area Walmart, leaving that Walmart on Sunday when the suspected gunman opened fire. And according to witnesses, Pamela, this gunman kept shooting as he was driving away. The Harris County Sheriff's Office is asking for the public's assistance to check any surveillance footage they might have. They're also combing their own surveillance footage and trying to get to the bottom of who is behind this just gruesome attack. Pamela.
Hopefully someone from the public will step up to help authorities find this gunman if he does not turn himself in. But I tell you, Nick, when that mother said her windows were not tinted, that gunman could look in her car and see it was a mother and her 4 children, and yet he still opened fire. It is just heartbreaking. Nick Valencia, thank you for providing those details. And up next, the North Korean dictator has a direct message for the United States in his New Year's address. Details on where negotiations stand with Kim Jong Un after a tumultuous year.
You remember the Black Dahlia murder?
January 28th. Don't miss TNT's new limited series, I Am the Night.
So you got a case, 10, 15 years old.
Starring Chris Pine.
And this girl knows all about it.
Inspired by a true story of one girl at the heart of Hollywood's most notorious murder.
I'll blow this thing wide open. This girl, she's the key.
The new limited series, I Am the Night. January 28th at 9 on TNT.
President Trump is giving the Pentagon about 4 months to withdraw the nearly 2,000 U.S. troops from Syria. According to a New York Times report citing administration officials, the president told the head of U.S. forces fighting ISIS about his timetable while he was visiting Iraq last week. President Trump defended his Syria plan on Fox News.
You know, I never said that I'm going to rush out. We're going to get out. We're getting out of Syria. We're bringing our young, great troops home after so many years. You know, we were supposed to be in Syria for 3 to 4 months, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. And it's time. ISIS was all over the place when I took over. It was a total mess in Syria. We've almost eradicated all of them. We think all of them will be gone by the time we get out.
And joining me now to talk more about this, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby. He's a retired U.S. Navy two-star admiral, former Pentagon spokesman, and CNN's military and diplomatic analyst. Thank you for coming on. Happy New Year.
You too, Pam. Thank you.
So first, right off the bat, does 4 months sound like a reasonable amount of time to you?
It's brisk, but I think it's doable. And I think from what I understand, 4 months was sort of always the minimum time frame that the Pentagon was planning to. So I think it's a stretch for Senator Graham or others to say, well, he's really considerably slowed this down. I think 4 months is really about the fastest that the Pentagon wanted to go. But given that we're talking 2,600 troops, they're mostly special operators, which means they don't have a lot of infrastructure with them, not a big footprint. I think it's reasonable.
All right, so let's talk about what we're hearing from the president. Of course, just a couple weeks ago, he said ISIS had been decimated. Now he's saying all of ISIS will be eradicated by the time he withdraws these troops. Is that feasible in your view?
Well, I think if he had not made the decision to withdraw, then I would say yes, probably. We were already they were down to about 1% of their territory in Syria. And Brett McGurk, the recently resigned special envoy to the counter-ISIS coalition, said back in early December that within a matter of a few months, they could remove that 1% and eradicate their presence in Syria. But even Brett back then said that's not the same as an enduring defeat of ISIS, that they would still have the ability to reconstitute themselves if we didn't stay and work on stabilization. The other thing that's important here, Pam, is now that he's made this decision, yes, we'll be moving out in 4 months, but we've already now sent a huge signal to all the players in the region that we have no intention of staying and fighting ISIS in any meaningful way. So all the players are now looking for new partners, and that will, I think, make it harder for any effort to actually eradicate them in the short term.
Yeah, that's interesting because the president had said previously that you don't want to sort of telegram to your adversaries about what you're going to do, and yet that's sort of what's playing out right now.
Exactly.
So you have Syria. Another challenge the president will continue to face in 2019, of course, is North Korea. In his televised New Year address, Kim Jong Un said he is ready to meet with President Trump again. He recommitted himself to abandoning nuclear weapons, but he had a caveat. Take a listen.
If the U.S. does not keep the promise it made in front of the world and misinterprets our people's patience and makes one-sided demands and continues down the path of sanctions and pressure on our republic, then we have no choice but to defend our country's sovereignty and supreme interest and find a new way to settle peace on our peninsula.
So how should the White House view this warning from Kim Jong Un?
Totally predictable. And I'm sure that the president's team actually was not surprised at all by Kim Jong-un's rhetoric. Remember, Kim wants a stronger economy. That's what his economy is one of the smallest in the world. It's not very integrated, and he has promised economic reforms. So he wants those sanctions lifted, and he considers the sanctions the biggest method of pressure that the United States and the international community are putting on him. Plus, he wants to keep his regime in power, and he wants leverage at the negotiating table, and his nukes and those missiles give him that leverage. So I think this was totally predictable. I don't think we should read more into it than it is. I mean, it is pretty much the same playbook he's been playing off of now for years. What matters is the diplomacy that we're not seeing play out on camera. And I do believe that the Trump administration is working hard to try to find a way through this, at least, if nothing else, just some additional confidence-building measures, small steps on both sides that they can take to try to loosen up the gears and get the talks back on.
And as we kick off this new year, it will be interesting to see if there's going to be a second summit between President Trump and Kim Jong Un. We'll have to wait and see. Admiral Kirby, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Pam. Good to be with you.
Well, the markets are closed today for New Year's, but they ended 2018 with the worst decline since the 2008 financial crisis. We're going to discuss why and fact-check President Trump's claims that everyday people are benefiting in this economy.
I'm Andy Katz from March Madness 365, and on this edition of our podcast, I'll be joined by Nevada's Eric Musselman.
You look at a guy like Trey Thurman, right now he's one of our most valuable pieces. He guards really good up-front players on the opposing team. He doesn't care if he takes a shot. He's a great screen setter for us, does all the dirty work, rebounds the ball. And so from a role standpoint, guys have really started to accept what we need.
Listen and subscribe to March Madness 365 today at Apple Podcasts and marchmadness.com.
Well, tomorrow, investors will get their first look at whether the markets will improve in 2019. After closing out the worst year for stocks in a decade, all three indices dropping between 4 and 6%. And December was particularly dismal, with the Dow falling nearly 9%, its worst since 1931. But with a continuing government shutdown and other turmoil in Washington, could a new year bring the same old problems? That is a big question. And joining me now to discuss more about this is CNN political commentator Catherine Rampell. She is an opinion columnist for the Washington Post. Catherine, thanks for coming on. Look, we know political uncertainty was a big factor for investors. They don't like uncertainty. Fears of a global trade war, the funding fight over the wall. Is President Trump responsible for these awful numbers?
Look, presidents get too much credit when either stock markets or the economy are good, and too much blame when they are bad. So I don't want to leave viewers with the impression that presidents control the market. They don't. That said, certainly there are a number of unforced errors here, and Trump is injecting a lot of uncertainty into the market. Basically, markets are guided by animal spirits, right? They go up, they continue going up as they have for the last basically 10 years until everybody collectively decides that they've probably gone up too much, and they should reverse themselves. And these kinds of shocks, things like trade wars, things like a government shutdown, White House chaos and turmoil, Trump threatening to fire the chairman of the Fed, which would be disastrous, those kinds of shocks can cause investors to reconsider whatever assumptions they have made about the market. So those kinds of forces of uncertainty, continued uncertainty about where policy will land, what Trump might tweet from day to day, none of that is good for volatility.
So just on that note, there have been some months while Trump has been president where the stock market's done really well, even though there's so much uncertainty about what he might do next and about what he may tweet next. So how do you sort of explain that?
I think there are a few things going on. Again, the market has been growing, on net anyway, for about the last 10 years. So Trump kind of came in with these tailwinds. He inherited them from the economy and the markets that were under Obama, although, again, I'm not saying that Obama controlled them. So some of this is just pre-existing trends. Some of this is, of course, the fact that we had a major tax cut. Stock prices are, by definition, a claim on the after-tax profits of a firm. So if you cut tax rates, by definition, that's going to raise market prices, or they should raise market prices. So we did see a boost as a result of the tax cut. Of course, a large part of that has now been reversed. So that's some of what's going on. And then in the last few months, a number of the factors that I mentioned earlier have gotten a lot worse. Things like the trade war, for example. Things like Trump exerting more pressure on the Federal Reserve, even more White House turmoil. So you see some factors potentially weighing more towards on the side of increasing stock prices, and a lot of other factors more recently causing investors to get a lot more skittish.
All right, quickly, let's bring out your crystal ball. What do you think 2019 will hold?
I think, unfortunately, more of the same. If I knew what markets were going to do, if I knew what the economy was going to do, I would be a very, very rich woman. I don't know those things. All I can say is that the kinds of factors that we've seen so far, driving volatility, increasing risks to the underlying health of the real economy, those don't look like they're going away. I'm not terribly optimistic that we are going to end this trade war, or rather trade wars, plural, anytime soon. I'm not terribly optimistic that the White House is going to suddenly become a calmer place with a more coherent economic or fiscal or financial policy. So I'm not super optimistic. That said, I don't think that we've seen anything in the data as yet that indicates an immediate recession or crisis or something like that is around the corner.
Okay, Catherine, thanks for coming on and breaking it down for us so we can understand this complicated stuff. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to turn now to this miraculous rescue from the rubble of a collapsed building in Russia. Watch as an 11-month-old infant was found alive after spending 35 hours underneath the wreckage. The building collapsed from an explosion thought to have been caused by a gas leak. Not only was this baby stuck underneath the rubble for almost a day and a half, but the temperature was in the single digits. And according to Reuters, the baby was diagnosed with serious freezer burn and a closed head injury. The baby's mother also survived and came to the hospital and recognized her son. Unbelievable. Well, just 2 days from now, the House will be back in session, and 5 of the new Democrats taking charge are going to make life very difficult for President Trump. We're going to break down what they plan to investigate in the new year. We'll be back.
Good day, Sweet World. Jay Skeets here from the Starters, and basketball is back. Join me, Tass, Lee, and Trey at 6 Eastern every weeknight on NBA TV as we break down everything that matters to NBA fans, from trade rumors to Twitter beefs. And don't forget to check out our podcast, The Drop, now dropping twice a week every Tuesday and Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and NBA.com/thestarters. Until then, embrace the day, people.
Well, it is a new year, and that means a new, more intense level of scrutiny for the president from the House of Representatives. The Democrats will take control of the chamber in just 2 days from now. And it's not just expected Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who is about to make she's about to make Trump's life harder. I want to bring in CNN politics reporter Lauren Fox. She is here with 5 more Democrats who are likely to battle the president in a big way in 2019. So, Lauren, some of these Democrats will be digging into a topic that's even more sensitive, arguably, to the president than Russia. And that, of course, is his finances.
Absolutely. A new cast of characters in the House of Representatives starting this Thursday, Pam. And I want to start with Richard Neal. He is the incoming chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and he is the Democrat on Capitol Hill who has the power to ask for President Donald Trump's tax returns. Now, a source familiar told me last month that Richard Neal will ask for the president's tax returns. He will make a formal request to Treasury any time in this new year. Now, there are still discussions about exactly when he will ask for them, but you can expect a protracted legal battle between the House of Representatives and the President of the United States when it comes to something Trump hasn't wanted to turn over before, Pam. Now, he's not the only person that's going to be looking into the president's finances. Maxine Waters, the incoming chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, also wants to look into any ties that the Trump organization has with Russia. Now, she is looking specifically for those kind of financial ties from the president, and she's tangled with President Trump in the past. She is beloved by the Democratic base, and she has said in the past that she thinks President Trump should be impeached. So she is going to be somebody at the forefront of this fight to do oversight into the Trump administration, and you can expect her to be a fierce critic of President Trump's. Now, Elijah Cummings is the incoming chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and he arguably has the most jurisdiction of any chairman coming in to look into the Trump administration, to conduct oversight. His committee can look into everything from immigration to security clearances on Capitol Hill, or at the White House, and I talked to him last month. He told me that he expects to bring in a wide variety of cabinet secretaries before his committee, including Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary. He has questions about how a question about citizenship ended up on the census. Now, we should also look to Adam Schiff. This has been somebody who is tangled with the president on the Russia investigation. He thinks Republicans haven't answered enough questions, and he has more questions. He looks to open up the Russia investigation. He wants to bring in folks like Michael Flynn before his committee. But there's one more person you should be paying attention to, and that is the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Jerry Nadler. His sole focus is going to be protecting the Mueller investigation, but he'll look into the president's impact on immigration, the rise of white nationalism in the country, and he is the person who's going to be leading any impeachment effort if Democrats decide to go down that path in 2019, Pam.
All right, Lauren Fox, thank you for breaking that down for us. It is much appreciated. And thank you so much for joining me on your New Year's Day. The 60s is next. And don't forget to tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern for the new CNN film, Love, Gilda. Have a great day, everybody.
Hey, Sekou Smith here from the Hang Time Podcast. Join me and my main man, John Schumann, every week as we break down the latest NBA news and storylines with guests from around the league. Be sure to subscribe to NBA Hang Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and NBA.com/podcast for new episodes every Monday and Thursday this season.